Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Betsy and Walter P. Stern Conferencing Center at Hudson Institute. My name is Peter Rao. I'm a senior fellow here and director of the Center on Europe and Eurasia. And it's truly a high honor and privilege to have with us today Kaja Kallas, the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and dare I say, the Vice President of the still new European Commission, although much has happened since you've assumed your Vice Presidency of the Commission. So for starters, thank you so much for taking the time. Welcome to Washington, and thanks for carving out a bit of time for us here at Hudson today.
Thank you for having me.
So Kaja Kallas was previously Prime Minister of Estonia, as many of you know, and I haven't told you this story yet, and I'm telling it here for the first time, but you actually taught me the importance of staying off of your cell phone at times, because 2 years ago, I believe it was, I was in Brussels for a conference that Hudson co-organizes with the Maarten Center, a Brussels-based think tank. And I was taking the elevator down in Brussels the day of a European Council meeting on my phone, reading about the European Council. The elevator opens, two individuals get off. I keep reading without looking up. We get to the bottom floor. I finish the article. And as I look up, the elevator's opening and Kaja Kallas is exiting with her security personnel. So I wish this was the second time we were meeting, but in fact, it's the first time here today. So anyways, stay off your phone, kids. It can hurt your networking opportunities. But let's begin with news.
You know, before we start, actually, coming here and seeing the agenda and Hudson Institute and also the background of Hudson Institute, and I was reading also, the coincidences. Herman Kahn. So the founder of
Yes.
The Institute. I mean, I read a book by him. It was written in 1963, I think. It was called The Year 2000. And when I had lectures in schools, I always brought this example because it's super interesting. The futurologists at that time could very well predict the technologies we are using in 2000. But of course, the cars, they get totally wrong all the time. I mean, but that point aside, but what they got wrong is that actually we change. Our behavior changes. So they predicted mobile phones, basically networking like we do, but like you use telephone in 1963. Being, at the table or stuck to the wall. So it was super fascinating, and so I mean, it's good to be here.
Great, well, wonderful. Thanks for being here. Speaking of changes, I would say the U.S. government's treatment of the European Union has changed in the last several months. You were here to meet Secretary Rubio. That meeting has been canceled ostensibly for scheduling reasons. And of course, everyone saw the president's remarks in the cabinet room yesterday, which you were asked about on NPR this morning. I listened to your interview. You're coming to us from CBS. I assume you're asked the same question by every media outlet wherever you go. So I won't repeat the question of what's your reaction. But I would like to know, how do you think about the EU's engagement strategy of the U.S. government? What's your strategic approach towards the Trump administration? And how do you navigate what is now a new government in reality here in Washington?
Well, the new administration has been in office for a bit more than a month. And of course, we are establishing the relationship and also adapting ourselves to the new style of the new administration. I mean, every administration works differently, and we have to work with every administration. We are able to do so. So, I mean, so far, I mean, we have had good meetings in Europe when it comes to Secretary of State Rubio. We had good meetings in Munich. And we will have good meetings in G7 in 2 days' time. So what is our strategy? I mean, we have been good friends and allies. And I think, the transatlantic relationship is beneficial for both sides. And we really want to stress that. Of course, it doesn't mean that we always see eye to eye on different issues, but friends and allies sit down and discuss what are the worries and come to solutions and come to compromises. So this is our strategy that we are trying to do, not start any kind of quarrels or wars with the United States. Because if you look what is going on in the world, we really need to stick together. We see Russia, Iran, North Korea very openly working together, more covertly also China. And we need to encounter these threats, and we need to do this together.
Do you worry that as the Trump administration seemingly is looking to split Russia from China, that in fact the Russians will split us from the Europeans?
It is very hard for us to see the Russian narratives now so strongly represented in America. It's quite surprising for us this regard, and of course, it creates a lot of questions. I mean, the United Nations vote that we had on Monday. I mean, we were. Together with the United States, we were co-sponsoring a resolution on Ukraine, and then suddenly not only United States withdrew its signature, but started to actively lobby against this. And then the end, we saw with whom United States voted together. Of course, one can say that United Nations doesn't really matter. But it shows how then you have new friends, Russia, Belarus, Nicaragua, Haiti, Mali, Central Africa. So, it raises a lot of questions. So what we're trying to understand, also meetings here, we try to understand what America is doing, or what is the goal, or what is the strategy, because we have always been on the same side with our biggest ally, and we want it to be so. So if there are worries, then we need to understand what are these, so that we can work together.
All right, well, let's turn towards areas of agreement or opportunity. Obviously, the U.S. sanctions campaign remains in place, and sanctions are being applied. Weapons continue to flow to Ukraine. And now, very interestingly, there is an apparent agreement on, well, I shouldn't even say apparent, there is now an agreement confirmed by both sides on critical minerals between Ukraine and the U.S. We're thrilled at Hudson to have here on the same stage tomorrow President Zelensky for an event. What do you make of the critical minerals agreement? How does Europe look at it? And how does Kaja Kallas look at it?
If this agreement increases the economic interest of America in Ukraine, and in the end that turns the interest of America also giving security to Ukraine, I think it's a very good development. So you have to protect and defend your economic interests that are there in Ukraine. For me, it has to go together with the security guarantees. What I hear is that, economic agreement as such is already a security guarantee, but I don't think it's so. I think there are also companies, American companies right now in Ukraine operating there, and the country still gets bombed every day. So it doesn't really work that way, that if you have the Americans present, then the Russians say, okay, we are not bombing them anymore. So you need some credible security guarantees. So, I think, agreements between Ukraine and America are good in a sense that if it is, a foundation of broader cooperation.
Let's move from the outright hot war in southeastern Europe towards what I think is already a hybrid war in an area very close to your own country, the Baltic Sea. I read, again, in the category of agreement and cooperation, a good piece recently about a detachment of American Marines that have deployed, I think, into coastal Finland to help monitor some of these critical infrastructures which have been sabotaged, attacked. How do you look at how does the European Union look at the present state of play on critical infrastructure in the broader Baltic region?
Well, it's not only the Baltic region. I mean, this is one of the things where I think we should also cooperate more to develop the international law further. Because if you think about the, UNCLOS and the maritime rules that we have, they are not in place for the times when we have actually cables running, on the seabed. And if you think, I mean, the cables between Taiwan and islands and Taiwan have been cut like over 30 times. It is a pattern. And what we see, I mean, the cable cutting in the Baltic Sea is one part of the bigger picture that we see, the hybrid war that is going on against Europe. Now, the Secretary General of NATO said that why are we using the hybrid war, because it seems like it's a soft and something, not serious enough, where what it actually is state-sponsored terrorism. We see arsons of warehouses, we see, sabotage acts, we also see, cyber attacks, we see different, destabilization acts going
cargo
on.
That could be loaded on airplanes, which could be catastrophic.
So I mean, all these things we see, and a bit it feels like it's like a boiling of a frog. That every next time they're bolder and we don't have a strong reaction. So what we do right now, I think very important, is to exchange information, really, to be open about this, to prepare. The second thing, it is, all the forces that we have gathered, also to, in NATO, but also, European missions, that we concentrate on really the protection of critical infrastructure. Because under, the sea, it is, the visibility is not as it is on the ground, and it is much more complicated. But I think, it is a broader picture when it comes to space as well. There's a lot going on in space. And now the big question is whether international law, as we know it, also applies in cyberspace or in space. When I think it was 2022, Estonia was also a member of the United Nations Security Council, and I was chairing the first ever meeting on cybersecurity. And it was interesting, the discussion was whether the international law should also apply in cyberspace. And you can guess which were the two countries that didn't agree to this. It was China and Russia. And I think the same applies for space. And this is very, very dangerous, because if you think about cyberspace, 10 years ago, hospitals, for example, their only security risk was some drug addict coming and stealing the morphine of a hospital or the narcotics. Now, the security risk of hospitals is also the cyber risk, because if they're cyber attacked, there could be civilian casualties if systems don't function. So I mean, it is, and at the same time we see this movement. I mean, if you see when President Xi was visiting Russia and made a statement there saying to Putin that changes not foreseen in 100 years are led by us together. Changes in the international law. And my feeling is that their wish is that we are back to the place where might makes right, and you don't have the protection of international law, really.
I think that's also probably something that welds together Putin and Xi. I mean, they are highly personalized authoritarian systems at this point, and they are fundamentally hostile to the American and Western European-built order, which makes it so difficult to think that one can take one of those actors and peel it away from the other. But that's my own editorial comment. A second editorial comment, which I'll frame as a question. We have lots of Europeans come through, and I put this question on critical infrastructure to a lot of them in private and public settings. And I often get the information sharing component as an initial building block of a unified response. I think one of the challenges is that the political economy of this is really beneficial to the attacker, which is to say it's very cheap for them to take out a cable, but it's horrendously expensive for us to rebuild this. And so to take a defensive posture, which is our seemingly current stance, might not be sufficient to deter this activity going forward. Is that something that worries you? Is there a response to this that we can think through on the policy side?
It worries me because it's exactly like you say. I mean, cutting the cable, just lowering the anchor and towing the anchor, it is easy. It's super easy. Whereas, I mean, repairing the cable, expensive, time-consuming, and has a lot of consequences for the countries really concerned and consumers, people, really. So that's why I think that we need to have that discussion, really how we have the rules in place. Although, I mean, considering that Russia doesn't really abide by the rules, so maybe it's not worth the effort. But I mean, the point is, what more can we really do in this regard? Okay, putting the cables so that you can't cut them with the anchors, but it's again investment. There are a lot of cables on the seabed, really. So I don't really have a good answer.
That's okay. I listened very, very closely to the interview that Secretary Rubio, flanked by his co-negotiators, gave after his meeting with Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Russian team in Riyadh. And almost as an aside, he said, I thought rather interestingly, of course, and I'm paraphrasing, but of course others will need to be at the table, including the Europeans, because they have their own sanctions package and their own sanctions regime. Just, I think, 3 days ago, the 16th sanctions package was ratified, an incremental change, but nonetheless a demonstration that Europe remains steadfast in its sanctions on the Russian Federation. Has there been any talk or coordination on the sanctions front with the new U.S. administration to date? No?
No, I mean, the new administration was very helpful in convincing our Hungarian colleagues to do the rollover of sanctions. And it is not wise to let go, some good cards that you have in your hands. So we shouldn't do that. That's very clear, yeah.
And I have read J.D. Vance on Twitter, the vice president, say that the U.S. maintains leverage, and presumably he's referring to the sanctions. How dependent or codependent are European sanctions on the American sanctions regime? Which is to say, if the U.S. decides to go for sanctions relief, does Europe then feel obligated to go the same course? Do you think it's possible to maintain your own sanctions regime on the Russians?
It is possible to maintain our own sanctions regime, and even if the rollover is not decided on the European level, then the individual countries, who are the coalition of the willing, can do the sanctions on their own. So if we don't have, this is one of the things. When I'm very often asked that, Americans are talking to the Russians, they are agreeing something, and you are not part of it. Then, I always ask back in very, very practical terms, how do you really see this? How do you see an agreement between, Russia and America working regarding Europe, that Europe has no say, because we need to implement those agreements. If we don't agree to this, you can agree whatever, but it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So you need the Europeans on board.
Yeah, presumably that's what Secretary Rubio was referring to. Coalitions of the willing, I like that phrase because I'm watching the External Action Service under your leadership and your guidance put forward some proposals in recent weeks on plussing up Ukrainian arms. I think the number I've seen reported is up to 20 billion euros. And rather than it being an officially blessed EU-wide deal, it looks like you're coordinating amongst individual member states for a coalition of the willing of sorts. Can you tell us more about this initiative, its size and scope, and what you're attempting to accomplish with it?
Yes. What I'm attempting to accomplish with it is, in short term, really the support to Ukraine that it needs. The stronger they are on the battlefield, the stronger they are behind the negotiation table. I mean, they have to be as strong as they would be able to say no to a bad deal. I think this is important. So the new initiative is basically, it is based on the GNI key of the country, and so basically either you chip in with the ammunition capabilities, or you provide the funds so that we can purchase this from elsewhere. We had the Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting on Monday. There was a broad support for that initiative. When it comes to numbers, then we didn't intentionally, I mean, first we had the numbers in, but then we heard back from some member states saying that, let the leaders decide on the numbers, leave the numbers blank, let's decide on the principle, and we have the meeting on the 6th of March where the leaders are meeting and we should agree. So, I mean, I try to say that, fine, if you say we need to discuss and look into details, fine, but take this time right now, because we really need to show our resolve to Ukrainians, also Americans, that we are doing this. So I'm quite optimistic. I'm always optimistic, but yeah, sometimes disappointed. But yeah, so we are working on that. The other topic that we are, or the other track that we are working with, is our own defense. So of course the big question is the funding. So where do we get?
Always comes down to money, doesn't it?
It does, because it costs a lot of money, and then. I mean, there are different options where we get the money. But what I'm trying to say to my fellow leaders in Europe is that if somebody thinks that we can get away with not making any difficult decisions, I mean, it's an illusion. I mean, as Prime Minister of Estonia, I had to raise taxes in order to get more funding for defense. And I can tell you, it's not popular. It's not popular. But you have to, talk to your people to make them understand that if we don't do this, then everything what we want to have is at stake. And by the way, there is one thing that I also bring, from America to Europe. So basically, I hear what the Americans are saying. They say, you have all the nice things in Europe. You have the, the vacations, you have the social security, you have the public health care, you have, social security. You have all of this that we don't have. We invest in defense. So now you're saying that we should defend your good life, and you're not willing to give one part of it away right. From all this pot that you have. So, and that's not fair. And I think that's a valid point. So I mean, that means requires from us to do some difficult decisions. So from some member states, you hear this, that and they are maybe further from the war. So you hear this, that you don't possibly think that, we can't invest in the roads and we will put this into defense. What will the people say? But, it was Plato who said that it's the role of the leaders is also to educate people. So you have to explain that, if we have a defense issue, then, you don't have to care about the roads because they get hit anyway. And the problem with defense spending is that you need to spend and invest in defense at the time where you actually don't need it. It's peace. People don't understand why are we spending this, but when you need it, it's too late. So I mean, that is the dilemma that leaders have to deal with, and that requires a lot of explaining to the public.
So we in the U.S. have famously atrophied our defense industrial base. but Europe has as well. I think interestingly, and this might be somewhat lost on American audiences, but our defense spending, because we've been allies and we see threats similarly, have actually risen and fallen similarly. Now, they might have been at different levels, but we took a peace dividend in the 1990s. So did Europe. How's it going? I know this isn't. There are more commissioners than just Kaja Kallas, but how do you think it's going on the defense industrial base?
There's a lot of work to do. I mean, I thought 3 years ago when the war started, I thought that, now the industry also understands, if you are in the business, you read the room, it's like, okay, now everybody's going to invest in defense, so we are going to, increase our production. But I was meeting also with some of the defense industry representatives. So they were like, show me the money, I will produce you the tanks. So I'm ordering, 100 tanks. I'm producing 100 tanks and not one more. So next one comes so the procurement times are very, very long. And they're not taking 1% risk. Because they have always operated so that your only customer is the government. So government comes with the money, they have the agreement, and fine. But I think there's a lot to learn from the Ukrainian defense industry, and we have now taken, the initiative also to invest in Ukrainian defense industry. And why? Because, they are testing all these things on the battlefield, like real time, what works, what doesn't work. They are bringing down the procurement times, they are bringing down the costs, and that is what we need to do, because we need to bring down the cost as well. Because we all need this. So, they need the push. And on the other hand, it's also, or the other side of the coin is the funding still. So one of the elements is also how to get more private funding into defense. We have the European Investment Bank, and so far investing in defense is the same box like investing in gambling, for example. So it's not, recommended or not allowed. But if they have these rules that it's in the same box, like gambling and other things like this, then also the private funds get this is the taxonomy, so to say. So they don't also invest in defense. If it is so, then the banks don't open bank accounts for the startups because they are in the defense sector, and that is the forbidden sector. So we are really pushing hard the European Investment Bank to change this. There is like a letter of over 20, I think it was 24 member states that really push. And there are different layers where to get the funding as well. Not only the public money, but also bring the private money on board.
Seems to me like after a NATO summit is always before the next NATO summit.
Yeah.
And so the Washington summit, of course, we were thrilled to host here in Washington, is now in the recesses of our mind, and everyone's already looking forward to The Hague. What is the EU hoping to get from the NATO summit, or have you begun to think about, obviously, EU-NATO issues, but pertaining to the summit itself?
First, we have the European summit before the NATO summit, and there I think it is in our interest that we also have some very strong decisions from there in order to go to the NATO summit to show also that what we are doing. I think this is the way we operate. So to show the Americans you're for real in a way? I think, but we have, all the decisions we have made, and also, President Trump, the last time he was in the office, I think, a lot has changed since then. Europeans have invested more in defense, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to do more, because Russia is investing more than 9% of its GDP on military. They will want to use it again unless we are strong enough so that he doesn't dare to take this up. So, for the NATO summit, we have so many things happening before that I haven't really thought about the NATO summit. But at one point, we start to prepare probably as well.
Great. Let's switch gears a little bit, because while the future of the European order is being decided in Ukraine, there is more to the world, and you have a global mandate as High Rep. Can you describe for American audiences how you think about the PRC and China policy? You can't get away with the conversation in Washington without somebody asking about Beijing. So tell us a little bit about how the new commission is approaching China.
Well, we have, of course, the de-risking policy. So really not to make the same mistakes that we have done with Russia. But now seeing America really bonding with Russia, then that, of course, raises a lot of questions regarding China as well. And of course, China is very friendly with us now. I mean, we need to have the discussions on our China policy. So far, it has been so that de-risking, really not to put all the eggs in one basket, in de-risking in the areas where the risks are higher, cooperating in other areas with China. So. And of course, here, what America does plays a big role. And by the way, one of the questions nobody is able to answer here about China. If, I hear the statements by some American officials saying that, you can't possibly beat Russia. I mean, Russia is so much bigger, and, you need to give in to Russia because it's not beatable, which is not true, by the way. But then you're trying to signal to your Asian counterparts that if China is attacking them, then you are there. But China is so much bigger economy than Russia is, with so much bigger military than Russia is. So if you're saying that you're not able to beat, that we collectively are not able to really pressure Russia so much that it would have an effect, because then how do you say that you're able to take on China risk? If somebody is able to answer me this question, I would be very happy.
We're actually going to delete it from the recording because we don't want the Chinese to hear that answer that you just gave.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm just joking. Let me ask you about again, in the sense, and I'll ask this as a last question, and then if we could go.
But my point is, I just want.
I think we all got the point.
Yeah, I know. If we don't get Russia right, we don't get China right either.
Yep.
That's my point.
I'll go to the audience for a question or two, if we could get the microphones ready, if that's okay. But my last question for you is, again, outside of the immediate Ukraine-Russia file, where do you think around the world are there opportunities to work with the United States?
Oh, okay. I thought your question is with other countries, because what has happened. What has happened is that we see. I mean, the queue behind our door is very long. All the Asians, African countries are looking at us, Latin America, because we are the reliable and predictable partner. So actually, I see opportunities for European Union to really, increase our geopolitical power, because everybody's turning to us, and of course we have to play it wisely, and we are doing that. I mean, in terms of development aid, we are the biggest supporters or biggest providers of development aid, but we need to do it. We need to do it strategically, and I mean, I see a lot of opportunities for Europe. Of course, we would like to cooperate with America on these issues, but we see a lot of friendships being built with everybody else.
Okay, we'll take a first question up to the front. This gentleman right here, and he can.
Thanks, Peter. Lou Coffey, Senior Fellow here at Hudson. I wanted to ask about CSDP and potential developments in this area that is in your area of competency as High Representative. In 1999, Madeleine Albright, as Secretary of State, wrote an op-ed in the Financial Times where she said EU defense integration is fine as long as there's no duplication, discrimination, or decoupling. So that's decoupling of the U.S. from European security, discrimination against non-EU members in NATO, and no duplication of what NATO is already doing. I know that with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there's been and some calls for strategic autonomy. There's been renewed calls for these ideas like European army and stuff like this. How do you see the best way for the EU to deal with the one issue that is perhaps the last remaining issue of integration, and that is defense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a very good question. I think I've always been of the opinion that Europe should not create any alternative to NATO, because NATO is a military structure, and every NATO member, we have 31 members now, 32 members? 32. 32 members now. So you have 32 different armies, 32 defense planners, and 32 defense budgets. So that means you need those armies to work together. And what now comes to the European side is that we need to have the interoperability of all the capabilities and stuff. I'll bring you one example. In Europe, we have 172 different types of ships, vessels, like whatever, 172. In America, you have 32. And with the Ukraine war, it is very, very obvious. We all give aid to Ukrainians, and these are not interoperable. Everybody has tweaked a little, their things, so it's mine, and it doesn't work together. But in terms of crisis, you need these things to work together. So that is what we are working on. And I'm very happy that the new Secretary General of NATO is Mark Rutte, who totally understands this. So we work very closely together and sharing the standards, NATO standards for the European industry, so we could produce the same things. Now, some are calling, because of the changes we see, some are calling that, we should, produce or just buy European and because right now we are buying more than 60%, we are buying American. When the last administration said to Ukrainians, you can't use the weapons the way you want to use them, then the message that everybody else got that in terms of crisis, when you actually need to defend yourself, then there are going to be limits how you can. So we need our own. That is the call that some are making, but I don't think it is wise to totally, shut into ourselves. We need the others. We need Turkey. We need US. We need also other partners, UK industry. So I don't think that flies. But strengthening the European industry is definitely one part of it. And now, it's always, chicken and egg issue. when we hear messages from America that, we don't really care about Europe, then of course it is also the feeling that, okay, but then why should we buy their weapons? Let's have our own. So actually you're going to lose jobs. But then, it's also, a vicious circle, because when Americans are saying that, okay, they're not even buying our weapons, so why should we care about their security? So, I think we need to find a real balance here. But I don't think, on the European side, we don't hear, actually, there is all those who have worked with the armies, they understand how NATO works. And that's why creating an alternative structure in terms of crisis, I think it's extremely dangerous. Because that means, in terms of crisis, it is the European army or the NATO army. Actually, it's the same armies. But who gives orders to whom? Right. In the military, it's the most important, the chain of command. Who gives orders to whom? So not to have alternative military structure, but to strengthen our defense industry, really to have our own. And also no duplication in that sense that we don't duplicate NATO, but also that we share the standards, so that we do the same things.
Thank you. The gentleman in the front.
Thank you very much. Gregor Schwung, I'm a U.S. correspondent for a German newspaper, Die Welt. I would like to know, when President Macron was here at the press conference with Trump, he committed to sending European peace troops in the name of all European nations. And he said that from Trump privately, he got the clear message of, quote, European solidarity and clear message of American solidarity for those troops and American deterrence, insinuating that there are American security guarantees for those European troops in Ukraine. Now, yesterday there was a report that Macron briefed fellow European leaders, and some European diplomats said to the media that actually Macron got nothing. So my question for you, I guess, is what did Europe get from Trump?
I mean, today, UK Prime Minister is here as well. And I think, you know, as many Europeans who can meet President Trump, the better. I think that is one thing. It is clear that everybody's talking about the security guarantees that America could give to Ukraine because of the promises made before. So you have different administrations, but the country has, still is, the promises given by the country are also, I mean, in the future, you can't just take them back. And if you think about the last NATO summit, it was that the path Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. So that was also the promise given to Ukraine. By the way, I had a meeting with the congressmen and one of them said that, we are interested in strong NATO. And I said, if you're interested in strong NATO, then the strongest army that there is Ukrainian. So get them in, and we have a very strong NATO. So, but yeah, that's not the case. But coming to your question, I've read the readouts. I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't comment on behalf of President Macron. But it's clear that the mandates we have. Talking on behalf of Europeans, they come from, we have the European Union that has mandate, for example, European Commission has the mandate to discuss the tariffs, trade. It is European competence. When it comes to defense, we don't have European competence. Every country decides on their own defense, arrangements. And can also give promises when it comes to who sends troops to Ukraine. But what I want to stress is that I think it blurs the picture that we are talking about peacekeepers, because Russia does not want peace. I mean, right now we need to focus so that we put the pressure on Russia so that they would want peace as well. They are in a position where, they don't really want this. So why are we talking about peacekeepers when there's nothing to keep?
Well, High Representative Kallas, when your name was floated and then announced as the next High Representative and Vice President, you could hear the champagne corks going off in the Center for Europe here at Hudson Institute.
Not in Russia, though.
Not in Russia, but here. And I think we got a taste of why that is today. Thank you for your friendship with the United States, your extraordinary leadership as Prime Minister and now as High Representative. We're honored to have you here, thrilled to have such a good partner, and we wish you good luck going forward and hopefully more collaborations to come.
Yes, and I also hope that we remain friends, friends and allies with the American. Coming from the time, we, as Estonians, we got our independence back when the West, and especially America, was at its height. I mean, really standing for the values, for the freedom, everything. So I refuse to give that up, I must say. We need to stand for that still, because the autocrats in the world are really, really teaming up, and we should, I mean, really stick together. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Please join me in thanking the higher up.